talk about issuing bonds at a premium. The price of bonds moves in the opposite direction of interest rates. So interest rates go down, our bond prices go up. Why is that? Because if we've got a nice high coupon sitting on our bond, it looks like a sweet deal. And in accounting class, we'll talk about issuing bonds at a premium and issuing bonds at a discount. Nowadays, of course, our investment bankers are very sophisticated and they know pretty much exactly the right interest rate to pick when we print the bonds. But later on, bonds trade hands out there between members of the investing public, and interest rates have moved up or down since those bonds were issued. And so that's really when this pricing of bonds becomes a critical issue, and we'll talk about that later in the class. So if we have a 10% rate printed on our bonds, and that's the right rate, then we're going to sell those bonds at face value. If we have a 10% rate, a contract rate printed on our bonds, but interest rates have gone up, then we'll issue those bonds at a discount because, as I say, the price of bonds moves in the opposite direction of interest rates. And what we're going to talk about now is if we have a rate printed on our bond and interest rates go down, so our bond prices go up, and we get to sell our bonds at a premium. Let's look at an example where we have a 10% rate printed on our bond, but interest rates have gone down to 8%. We're going to sell them at a premium, and the amount of that premium is going to be just enough to change the effective rate on that bond to be 8%. All right, let's assume we printed up a 20-year bond with a 10% coupon. That's the contract rate. We have a binding contract to pay 10%. It's like our mortgage. If you have a mortgage on your house at 4% and interest rates go down to 3.5%, you can't just start paying lower amounts of interest to your lender. You have a contract to pay them 4%. We have a contract to pay our bondholders 10% interest every year. Let's say the bond is dated January 1st. Let's say interest payments are due July 1st and January 1st. Remember, in the real world, bonds pay interest twice a year. The principal amount is $100,000. So at the end of 20 years, we're going to have to pay back $100,000 no matter what we sell the bonds for originally. And in this example, interest rates have gone down, so bond prices should have gone up. Remember, the price of a bond is the present value, the value today, of the future cash flows, discounted at the market rate of return. In this case, the market rate is 8%. Okay, you can use Excel, you can use tables in the back of accounting books, or you can use financial calculators to find the price of a bond. So let's find the price of this 10% bond in an 8% market. First of all, on our financial calculator, we'll clear everything out of the third row. This calculator uses the third row to find the time value of money. What's the N? What's the number of periods? Well, if it's a 20-year bond and it pays interest twice a year, 20 times 2 is 40. So 40 is the N. Then my trick is when I'm finding the price of a bond when interest rates have moved, I plug in the interest rate first as if the market rate were the same as the contract rate. That way I can make sure that I get the face value of the bond as the present value, and that tells me that I've put in all the other terms correctly. So in this case, the annual rate is 10. Since there's interest payments twice a year, that means the periodic rate is 5. So the interest per period is 5 interest per period. We're going to solve for the PV. We're going to solve for the present value, so we're not putting anything in there. The payment is $5,000. It's a $100,000 bond, and it's a 10% interest, so that would be $10,000 a year, but it pays interest twice a year, so that would be $5,000. And the future value, the principal we have to pay back at the end, is $100,000. No matter what we sell these bonds for, we're going to have to repay $100,000 at the end. And so now let's solve, compute PV, and we get $100,000. So now I know I put in the right N, the right payment, and the right future value. All I have to do now is tweak the interest rate. The interest rate is 8% a year or 4% every 6 months. So we put in 4 interest per period and now solve for the present value. And so interest rates have gone down. We can sell this bond for $119,793. Okay, what does that journal entry look like? Well, let's round up to $119,793. So that's what people are going to pay us when they buy our bonds, but we're still only going to owe $100,000 20 years from now. So we're selling our 10% 20-year bonds to yield 8% to the investors. That journal entry doesn't balance, so we have to credit an account called Premium on Bonds Payable. for the difference, $19,793. This is called an adjunct account. Discount on bonds is a contra liability account. Premium on bonds is an adjunct account. And what we're going to do is we're going to amortize that premium on bonds payable throughout the life of these bonds. There's 40 payments, so we're going to use the straight line method in this class, which means we're going to take 19,793 and divide it by 40, and that's how much we're going to amortize each time we make a payment. So the contract rate is 10%. That means we're going to write a check for 5% of the principal every 6 months. Credit cash for $5,000. We're going to amortize this. So we're going to take 1/40th of it and debit the account premium on bonds payable for 1/40th of its original balance. And that's going to reduce our interest expense. Well, why is the interest expense on our books less than our cash interest expense? Well, because we're paying interest as if we borrowed $100,000, but we really got $119,793. So our effective interest rate is lower than our cash interest expense. So just for the heck of it, maybe this will help you understand, maybe it won't. Let's look at this transaction from the point of view of the buyer of those bonds. What is their return going to be? What's their yield going to be? Well, let's clear everything out of this third row on this calculator. And let's say that the 40 is the end. They're going to receive interest payments twice a year for 20 years. We're going to solve for the I. They're going to spend $119,792.77. That's money out of pocket to buy the bond. And in return, they're going to get $5,000 every 6 months. And they're going to get $100,000 at the end. So we hit compute I, and we take that and we multiply that times 2, because that's the semi-annual return, to get the annual return of 8%. So we price this bond at the right price so that they will earn 8% on their money. After all, we're selling a 10% bond in an 8% market.